Good afternoon, everyone. This is the challenge of gatherings in Minnesota. We just love being together. It is so good to see all of you here this afternoon. I'm Nisha Bochwe. I serve as the Dean of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, and it's my sincere privilege and honor to welcome you here. Bill McGovern, the Dean of the Law School, is not able to join us today, but we are so thankful for the partnership with the Humphrey School and Law School in bringing together our inaugural Humphrey Global Speaker Series, launching today. We're especially honored to open this series with Professor Akhil Reed Amar, one of the nation's most distinguished constitutional scholars. And before I provide a bit more background on our speaker for today, I just want to acknowledge a few folks who are in the room with us. We have our Board of Regent Representative Ellen Lugar. Ellen, where are you? I saw you earlier. There's Ellen. Let's thank her for her service. We also have Justice Gordon Moore with us today. Thank you for joining us as well. And then I just want to take a note of privilege. I have a number of advisory council members for the Humphrey School in the audience. If you're here, would you just wave? Thank you for your leadership and support. Thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about Akhil. So Akhil's work has profoundly shaped how we understand the Constitution, not as a static document, but as a living reflection of our nation's evolving pursuit of equality and justice. Today's lecture follows the publication of his latest book, Born Equal, Remaking America's Constitution, 1840 to 1920. This is the second volume in his planned trilogy on the U.S. Constitution, and who does not love a trilogy? This newest work explores one of the most transformative periods in our constitutional history, when the country remade itself around the principles of equal rights and democratic inclusion. And in our own deeply polarized era, it feels especially appropriate to reflect on how the United States managed to expand rights and strengthen democracy during an even more divided time. That perspective reminds us that progress has always required courage, debate, and a belief in the possibility of renewal. Before I turn things over, I want to thank my colleague Arshad Mohammed, who joined the Humphrey School just about a year ago, or I guess just this year. Oh my gosh, Arshad's been with us for a while, but joined the Humphrey School just 4 months ago as a senior fellow. He's already made a remarkable impact, mentoring students, sharing his deep global expertise, and helping us ask sharper questions about the world we live in and the world we want to live in. You'll note, if you see Arshad in the Humphrey School, he is always, if he's in public, deep in conversation with students, really engaging them and helping lead this next generation of leaders with great experience, insight, and deep care. And so now it is my pleasure to hand it over to Arshad Mohammed, who will introduce our featured speaker, Professor Amar.
Thank you all for coming. It's really an honor to introduce Akhil. Here are a few things that I am not going to emphasize about him. I am not going to emphasize that he is a sterling professor of law and political science at Yale. That is the best, most prestigious endowed chair at Yale. I am not going to emphasize that he has been cited in Supreme Court by Supreme Court justices across the spectrum in more than 50 cases, and that his work has won awards from both the American Bar Association and the Federalist Society. And I am not going to emphasize that he's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and that he was an informal consultant to the hit TV show, The West Wing. Instead, I would like to tell you a short story. When I asked Akhil if he would come and give a lecture in Minnesota, he agreed immediately. I then said, with a tinge of embarrassment, you know, the honoraria that we pay at the Humphrey School are not very big. Our students go into public service. No, they don't bill by the hour. Or and he said, I have a policy of never taking honoraria. He then said, he asked if the U might take whatever it might have for an honoraria, buy some discounted copies of his book so that he could give them away for free to the students who attend the lecture. Those books are before you. If you can do the math, you'll see what our honoraria adds up to. I share that story because that simple request on his part illustrates both his generosity and his deep devotion to educating his fellow citizens about the United States Constitution. With that, I give you Akhil Reed Amar.
Well, thank you so very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be with you. The good dean said several things, but one word that she used was debate. That's important in our country. This talks about the era of Abraham Lincoln. That's, of course, the era of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And in that spirit, I hope to reserve a lot of time for, if not debate, at least discussion and conversation. So, Arshad, how long would you like me to go? Yeah, I'll aim for 20, and it'll end up being 30 because I can be a bit long-winded. My apologies. Now, my friends we didn't. We have this PDF slides. How do if I just want to show them a PDF slide or two, what could I do? And if not, we'll just, I saw Clapton play acoustic, so, you know, we'll just, okay. But let's just talk a little bit about the era of Abraham Lincoln. And this new book, which is the second, as you heard, in a hoped-for trilogy, tells the story of America between 1840 and 1920. Oh yeah, that's it. There we go. Because the Twin Cities are actually an important part of this first slide. This is about America. So it's America in the era of Abraham Lincoln. And it's the second volume of a hoped-for trilogy in which I'm going to try to tell the story of America basically from a constitutional point of view, the story from start to finish, the last quarter millennia, basically. So volume 1, which is even longer than this one, is entitled The Words That Made Us. America's Constitutional Conversation. It's a word akin to debate and discussion, as the word that Nisha used, debate. America's Constitutional Conversation, 1760 to 1840. It's the first 80 years, the first 80 years. And why do we say the first? Because America doesn't really exist as a thing, as an it, as late as 1760. It's a series of contiguous mainland colonies. They happen to have the same crown, but they're not even talking to each other. So there are New Yorkers, and there are Pennsylvanians, and South Carolinians, and Virginians. There are these 13 mainland colonies as late as 1760, but they're quite distinct, each from the other, and sociologically and culturally, and they're not even talking to each other. One way you can measure that is newspapers. To what extent are they republishing essays from sister colonies? Almost not at all. They are in conversation with London. It's hub and spoke, but no rim. And over the course of 80 years, the they becomes an it. I argue in that book an indivisible it. So the words that made us is a pun. It's the words that made the United States. It's how US. It's how we become, that is us, become a we, a capital we the people. So in 1760, to repeat, that's not the reality. But over the course of a generation, there is an experience of, at first, British neglect, and then actually British oppression that pushes the 13 together, and they start conversing with each other in newspapers. They meet face to face, the leaders of these colonies, in a Stamp Act Congress in 1765, in a Continental Congress in First Continental Congress in 1774, and a Second Continental Congress in 1775 that will eventually declare independence and adopt a document. 2 days later, they declare independence, of course, as you all know. America declares its independence, as you all know, on July 2nd, 1776, but adopts a text giving reasons 2 days later, July 4th, 1776, and then there will be state constitutions that emerge, a first version of a continental regime called the Articles of Confederation. It will give way to a much stronger, I argue, indivisible union, cemented by a constitution that will be followed by a set of amendments, the most important of which we call the Bill of Rights. The system will stabilize and consolidate. So volume 1 of this trilogy, as I said, tells the story of the first 40 years, an era of resistance and revolution and constitution and ultimately consolidation, with George Washington as the first president, and then a series of fellow founding fathers leading the Republic. And by the end of that volume, 1840, the founding generation has died off, and the question will be, whether the next generation will be able to carry the project forward. So that's volume 1. This one just came out, volume 2, a month ago. And this one tells the story, and thank you, my friend, Arshad. Thanks. This one, volume 2, which is, if you're a Tolkien fan, might be considered the Two Towers. The first one was The Fellowship of the Ring. Takes you, the reader, from an era in which millions of Americans are enslaved, through the rise of a great statesman, Abraham Lincoln, whose election to the presidency as the first anti-slavery president, openly anti-slavery president, will precipitate a civil war, and a war that will result in a series of transformative amendments, a 13th ending slavery, a 14th promising birthright citizenship and civil rights for all, a 15th prohibiting race discrimination in voting, ultimately a 19th in 1920 prohibiting sex discrimination in voting. The book tells the story of a series of, I argue, Lincolnian amendments based on an idea, a growing, a widening, a deepening idea of birth equality, hence the title, Born Equal. And this story, which begins to repeat with millions of Americans in chains, will end with women voting equally across the land. 13, 14, 15, and 19, I argue, are all unified by this vision of birth equality, which grows as America grows. And that's the dramatic story, the transformation, the remaking of America's Constitution between 1840 and 1920. And so the words that made us, the Constitution, essentially, especially, are now being remade through a series of transformative amendments. So the big idea of Volume 1 is we become a we. And we become, indeed, I argue, an indivisible we. So I'm with Mr. Lincoln on that one. And this volume, the big theme is birth equality. Volume 3, if I'm lucky enough to live to complete it, will tell the story of America from 1920 to the present moment. It's tentatively entitled Earth's Best Hope, America's Constitution, 1920 to present. And it will tell the story of America's increasing engagement with the world. America is going to become more global, and the world is going to become more American, more democratic, for example, than it ever was before, inspired by the American Constitutional Project and shaped by the American Constitutional Project. Now, why am I doing this? And truthfully, my friend Arshad was very, very generous, but truthfully, I'm not doing it for the money, because I candidly could retire. I'm 67 years old, and my parents, God bless them, invested in California real estate a long time ago, so don't worry about me. But I'm not really into golf, and so was it Jethro Tull? I'm too old to rock and roll and too young to die, at least at present. But here's what I actually think America desperately needs, and maybe that I was put on this earth to try to provide. We need a national narrative. We don't have one. We don't have a coherent sense of where we came from as a people, and we Americans have almost nothing in common other than this narrative, which has not been, I think, provided for this generation. Here's what we don't have in common: race, religion, national origin, first language, native language, politics. Oh, we're deeply divided. Geography, it's a vast continent, east to west, north to south. And even within localities, huge differences between cities and the hinterland, in Minnesota and many other places, of course. So, what holds us together? See, because if we had some strong authority figure who just told everyone what to do, well, then we wouldn't necessarily need horizontal glue, person to person. But that's not how America works. We're supposed to be a republic. We're supposed to actually be self-governing, and citizens are supposed to participate, so they have to be able to actually interact with each other, but they don't have very much in common. And I claim the only thing, really, that they have in common is the Constitution and the story behind the Constitution, what I'm calling our national narrative, which, of course, centrally, at least in my view, I say, of course, you have to decide for yourselves, of course, includes the Declaration of Independence. And, of course, includes debates about the deeply contested relationship between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And that's what I'm trying to do in these 3 books. Now, my job, as I see it, is to write the books and to schlep my carcass here, there, and everywhere to talk about the books. Your job, and this is a heavy burden that I'm laying on you, your job is to read the books. Okay, and if you don't, not to put too fine a point on it, the Republic could die. No, that wasn't a laugh line. Okay? Seriously. John Kennedy is saying, what can you do for your country? And what you can do is at least understand your country, and most of you don't. And you don't therefore have enough in common with your fellow citizens to make the project work. And every 4 years, you pick a president. We're the hiring committee. And the first thing that person has to do is to raise his right hand and swear, that I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And you can't know whether they're actually doing that or not if you don't know, I was going to use a swear word, if you don't know squat about the Constitution. How can you pick someone to do that if you don't even know what the job description is? Okay? I'm in Minnesota, so I guess I should say something. I'm going to date myself. Maybe you can talk about like Fran Tarkenton or something like that. Okay, so who was a certain kind of quarterback. He was a scrambling quarterback. He wasn't a pocket passer. And you guys are nodding your head as if you know what the hell I just said. Okay, you know more about football, which doesn't matter, than about presidents. They're different kind of presidents, and some are pocket passers, and some are scramblers, and if you don't know who was good in your view and who wasn't, how the hell are you going to pick the next person and judge them and decide whether they're actually being faithful to their oath of office or faithless? You have to know the story, and now this is a somewhat older crowd, but I think especially younger people don't at all. And that's why I'm writing these books. If you read them, and I'm not asking you, I'm begging you to, and it's going to be hours and hours of your time that you could instead spend doing something, useless, like golf. Instead of golfing or we're such a free society. There's so many fun things that we can do. Okay? But instead of doing that, you owe it to the Republic to understand the history of the Republic. And that's what these books are all about. Here's what they're not. They're not partisan. So, for example, let's take a great Minnesotan. His name is Harry Blackmun. My brother clerked for him. We love him in our family. He authored Roe versus Wade. I'm pro-choice. And I'm very critical of Roe versus Wade because it's not rooted in the Constitution, I think, rightly understood. I could be wrong about that, but you're not going to get my politics when you read my books. My books are going to actually criticize, and indeed have criticized, Roe versus Wade. And to repeat, my brother clerked for Harry Blackmun, and Harry Blackmun wrote Roe, but Roe is not constitutional law well done. I've never owned a gun, don't really probably intend to unless things get a lot worse. But I think you have a right to have a gun for self-protection, and that's not even because of just the Second Amendment, because of the 14th Amendment and other things that you will learn about when you read the books. So I'm not going to tell you, this is not, the words that made me. It's not a story of me, it's a story of us. And you need to know that story, and you're going to disagree when you read things. Some of you are going to actually have one interpretation of the words that I introduce you to, and others may have a different interpretation, but we all need to work off of the same base. This is what the Constitution actually says. This is what the Declaration of Independence actually says. This is what Lincoln actually did say at Gettysburg, and here's what he meant by that. And at the heart of this book is a deep debate about 5 words. I give you, in the middle chapter about the Lincoln-Douglas debates, 10 different ways of reading 5 words. All men are created equal. There are at least 10 different ways to read that in the middle of the 19th century. And Lincoln evolves over the course of time from one to another, to another. So I said, era of Lincoln. Let me just tell you a little bit more about the era of Lincoln, but let me take a big step back and tell you just a bit more about the words that made us. I'm trying to, even though I'm writing big, long books, I'm trying to make it accessible to my fellow citizens. So these books are aimed at Supreme Court justices. They are. And Arshad, I am ridiculously proud. I have many flaws. I'm not modest, but I'm honest. And so is Abe. I'm ridiculously proud of the fact that my work has been cited by the Supreme Court over 50 times, and it's across the spectrum, and almost no one else is. And just to put that in context, no one under age 70 has been cited more than 50 times by the Supreme Court, okay? So I'm aiming at Supreme Court justices because over the years, they've actually paid attention to what I've said, and I'm grateful for that. They don't have to agree with it, but at least they have to engage it. But I'm trying to write a book that at one end could be read, and I think is being read by justices on the Supreme Court, and at the other end could be read and is being read today by kids in AP History and AP Government, okay, high school, and definitely at a great college like the University of Minnesota. Don't hold it against me, I was born in Ann Arbor, but you know, we can still be friends. We just won't talk about certain things. So if you read these books, here's my promise to you. You will know more than I knew before I researched and wrote the books. I have two brothers. One was the dean of a great Big Ten law school, University of Illinois College of Law. The other is a brain surgeon. My kid brother wrote a book about brain surgery. I couldn't even read it. If I read it, I wouldn't understand it. And even if I read it and kind of understood it, I couldn't perform brain surgery. Okay? You read my books, you can actually do constitutional law. It's designed for ordinary people. It's written by ordinary people, ratified by ordinary people, and you will know tons more than I knew before I wrote the books, because I unlearned a lot of things in the course of researching and reading this book, writing these books. So, just very briefly, The Words That Made Us it tries to go down easy. It tells the story of law in part by telling the story of people. 6 people loom very large for the first 80 years. They're conventionally called the Big Six founders. If this were a Family Feud, how many minutes more do we have, Arshad, about? How many more minutes should I go? Okay, so if this were Family Feud, and the question were, name a founder, survey says, you're all going to tell me actually who the Big Six are. There's a second tier, but the 6 most important founders are, just shout out their names: Madison, Franklin, Hamilton, Jefferson, Adams, Washington. Yes. Okay. And we could talk about the second tier: John Hancock and James Otis and Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry and John Jay. There's a second, but those are the Big Six. Now, I've just proved to you something interesting. We're Americans. We actually have something in common. Now, the next step is for you actually to know something about those folks. And when they came together and when they pulled apart and how to think about them and what they might mean for us today. And if you read The Words That Made Us, you will know tons more about the Big Six. For example, the father of the Constitution is? Okay, survey is saying Madison, and that's what I thought, but you're going to have to unlearn that because that's actually ridiculous. Okay? One of you has read the book, okay? It's, of course, George Washington. So let me put it in a way that maybe, since I mentioned, football, we could talk about the Vikings or something like that, that you could understand. James Madison is 5'4". No, he's not going to be your quarterback. No way, no how. George Washington is obviously and overwhelmingly the father of the Constitution, because when you go to our national capital, it's not called Madison, D.C. And that 555-foot obelisk is not the Madison Monument. And unanimously selected presiding officer at Philadelphia was not James Madison, it was George Washington, because he had the only army on the continent and he defeated the British and didn't try to make himself king. As in, no kings. I don't know why I'm thinking about that now. As in Viking. No. I'm getting confused. Okay. So, no one's heard of James Madison. And George Washington could have made himself king for life and doesn't. Gives up the army, and when his country needs him, he comes out of retirement, and he's, to repeat, the unanimously selected presiding officer at Philadelphia, and he gets everything he wants in the Constitution, which is a ridiculously strong executive. That's why the president's so dangerous, because it was designed by Washington for Washington, because he needed it to win the next war, whenever that might occur, against whom, might choose to attack the United States. And people vote for the Constitution because, and at Philadelphia, he smiles and people vote yes, and he frowns and people vote no. And there are only 12 states in attendance, typically at any one moment, maybe only 10 in the room. They vote by state. In 5 of those delegations, he's got his law clerk as an aide-de-camp from the Revolutionary War. Hamilton in New York. Pinckney, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney in South Carolina. Mifflin from Pennsylvania. McHenry from Maryland. And whom am I missing? It'll come to me in a minute. Randolph from Virginia. And that's not even counting all the other veterans in the room, okay? So, and they're going to give him everything he wants, and the fact that he's vouching for the Constitution is what puts it over the top, and Franklin helps as well, but Franklin's too old to lead the Republic. And he's the unanimously elected first president, unanimously re-elected first president. How the hell could anyone think it was James Madison? And you can do word searches. Go back after this lecture, do a word search, because you can do this now in historical newspapers. Just put in Father of the Constitution. It's never James Madison before 1825. Okay? So, you think you know stuff, and you do. You know that they're the Big Six, but you don't know the most elementary things about the Big Six. Here's why that would matter today. Why is it 9-0 in the Supreme Court that, of course, President Trump isn't stuck with Anthony Blinken as the Secretary of State? He can pick his own guy, Rubio. And it's 9-0 that he can fire Rubio tomorrow for whatever reason he likes, because he thinks Rubio is too short. He can do that. That's 9-0. Does the text say that? No. It talks about appointment, doesn't talk about removal. Do the Federalist Papers say that? No, they actually say if the president's going to fire someone, he's going to need the Senate's consent, just like you need the Senate's consent to make an appointment. It's 9-0 because George Washington insisted that his understanding of executive power was people worked for him and he had to be able to fire someone when he lost confidence in them, because the nanosecond he decides that Benedict Arnold is not trustworthy, he has to be able to sack that guy immediately, because he's responsible for the whole thing. And that's Washington's understanding, and we call that the decision of 1789. And now the only question is whether that applies to the Federal Trade Commission and the Federal Reserve System. Okay, but it's absolutely clear it applies to the cabinet, and because it's Washington's Constitution and his understandings of the executive power that actually govern, and you didn't know that if you didn't read the book. Okay? That's just an example. I could give you lots more. Here's the problem with Volume 1. It's long, okay, and that's a problem. And its central figures are all white men. And that's not America today. Do not blame me for this. You're the ones who said they're the Big Six. We all do. This is not my choice. I'm just actually telling you who was important and who wasn't. And I love Abigail almost as much as John does, but she's not central. Now, here's the thing about Volume 2. I tell the story, and I'm trying to do it narratively because I have to seduce you to read the damn book, okay? And so I have to draw you in novelistically, kind of like The West Wing. It's an ensemble cast. And it's interesting when these people come together and pull apart, and Madison and Hamilton come together for the Federalist Papers, and Madison stabs Hamilton in the back. And there are teams. Washington and Hamilton are a team, and Jefferson and Madison are a team. And the teams sometimes work together and sometimes pull apart. And John Adams is not much of a team player, but at least he has Abigail. And he does. Okay. But volume 2, if it's about equality, if it's about birth equality, if the biggest idea of the book is, and it is, that no one should be exalted or demeaned because of how they were born. That people shouldn't be raised up or put down because of the accidents of their birth. They shouldn't be exalted because they were born white rather than black, or male rather than female, or Jew rather than Gentile, or in wedlock rather than out of wedlock. Alexander Hamilton's a bastard, born out of wedlock. How does a bastard orphan, son of a whore? The book is dedicated, the first book, to Lynn Miranda and his spouse, and Neil Katyal and Ron Chernow and others. We can talk about that. But you shouldn't be exalted or demeaned whether you're born a child of citizen parents or born a child of non-citizen parents, as I was. My parents happened to be here legally, but even that doesn't matter constitutionally, even if they were here illegally, and we can talk about that if you'd like. That's the big idea of birth equality. Wow, it's a profound idea. It's a riff on all men are created equal, but it's reading it way beyond what some did in 1776. It's still a deeply contested principle. We have to debate about it, talk about it. That's the idea at the heart of this book. But this book, because that's about birth equality, male and female, black and white, it's going to have a different cast of characters. Now, if you haven't read the book, hold off if you have. But if you haven't, I actually tried to tell the story from 1840 to 1920 using 4 main characters. So I've already tipped my hand with one. One has to be Abe. Okay, Abe Lincoln. He's a white man. Who else would you cast if you were casting this as a novel or, TV series or something? This is a book. Frederick Douglass, America's greatest black man. Yep, he's too. But it's about female equality too. Elizabeth Cady Stanton is number 3. Okay, you see, like the book, it's like you're saying, like, why did we need you to write the book? Yes. The 4th you may not get. It's Harriet but not Tubman. This is about people who read and write and make arguments. It's Harriet Beecher Stowe. And she's America's first female superstar. She's the first woman that everyone is talking about in America. She sells millions of copies, millions of Uncle Tom's Cabin. That book sells more copies than any book in the century, more than Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer, Scarlet Letter, Moby Dick. And she's talking about slavery, which is the big issue. And she's writing as a woman and as a mother, and she's talking about slave women and slave mothers and slave children and what it's like to have a slave child ripped away from a slave mother's embrace. She's talking about Eliza and not just Tom, okay? And wow, you will never think about slavery the same way after you've actually seen the world through Eliza's eyes. And so my claim is Abigail is interesting, but she's not center stage. Harriet Beecher Stowe is America's first leading lady, first female superstar. So before there was Taylor Swift or Beyonce, or Eleanor Roosevelt or Hillary Rodham Clinton or Kamala Harris, there was Harriet Beecher Stowe, and I'll introduce you to her. We're friends, she and I. And you can be her friend too. You can read her stuff and let her get into your head and heart. Okay, so just finally on lessons, and I have this picture on the board because here's one lesson. We are indivisible. Where are we? The top picture is American 1830. On the bottom is America's water flows today. Abe Lincoln insists that you can't actually have unilateral secession. A whole bunch of reasons why. The biggest reason, and this was the deal at Philadelphia, read Volume 1. If the Constitution provided for unilateral secession, gee, why didn't they say so? Because that's a pretty good feature. Hey, money back guarantee. Take it home for 30 days. You don't like it, bring it back. We'll give you your money back. And no framer, the Constitution doesn't say that. No framer ever said that in an entire year. None ever did. They said explicitly stuff like the Constitution, this is Hamilton quoting Madison in the New York Ratifying Convention, must be ratified in toto and forever. And they say it's the law of the land. Like, what part of that do you not understand? The law of the supreme law of the land. And if it were otherwise, South Carolina, if it's allowed to secede today, could make a treaty with Putin tomorrow, and the day after that, you will have Russias in the Carolinas, which is not where you want them. Ask any Ukrainian. And Americans have been free for the first 150 years because we don't have land borders with thuggish regimes. And you didn't know that, but that's actually why Americans are free. It's not separation of powers. It's not this or that, or all the other crap that you were taught in 8th grade. Americans are free because there's no standing army in peacetime for the first 150 years because we basically know that we can beat Mexico and we can beat Canada. Okay, and they don't pose existential threats to us. Oh, but Russians on our borders might. Okay, so Abe is right about that, and we have to stay a we. That's one lesson of the Lincoln era. And we have to talk to each other, and he engages in debates with folks. And that's a lesson from this era. America, and he's a nobody from nowhere. No name, no family fortune, no family name. He has less than a year's total classroom education in his life, and he gets himself elected president. Why? Because he is a great lawyer, a great constitutional lawyer, a great originalist who will follow what the Constitution actually says, even when he doesn't love it, and is hiding there in plain sight before your eyes, and you're not even seeing and hearing it. 77 years ago, he says, he's talking about something happened 87 years before. There's no one in this room that can remember what happened 87 years ago today, because you'd have to be 93 and have a great memory. He's making an originalist argument. 1863, that's Gettysburg, minus 4 that's 420s, 87, it's more soaring to say 4. It's biblical. The life of man is 10 rather than 87. 87 from 1860, that's 1776. He's not talking about the Constitution even. He's talking about the Declaration, 1776. Our fathers brought forth upon this continent, he's thinking geographically, a new nation, a new thing in the world, conceived in liberty, not in slavery, liberty, and dedicates the proposition that all men are created equal. He says that's the key idea, which it wasn't perhaps in 1776. He says that needs to be the cornerstone of the foundation, the keystone of the arch. It's contested, but he's making originalist arguments. Read Cooper Union. Wow, originalist argument after originalist argument, and Cooper Union is a speech he gets to give because Harriet's brother, Henry Ward Beecher, invites him to give a speech to make the case before the Eastern establishment. Okay, so how many of you are actually connected to law? We're in a law school now, so do not be ashamed of this. Don't let people, make fun of you. If anyone ever does, just look at them and say Thomas More, Abe Lincoln, Mahatma Gandhi, lawyers all, and their lawyerliness is connected to their greatness. Lincoln is a great constitutional lawyer. That's why he gets elected. I think we could use more of that today, but that's just me. You have to decide for yourself, okay? But he will follow the Constitution. He's an originalist. Don't let people tell you that originalism is only something on the right, okay? It's only Scalia or Mies or Bork or Thomas. There are great liberal originalists. In the 20th century, that would be Hugo Black. In the 19th century, no one was greater than Abe. Say maybe one or two more things, and then let's have conversation. Lessons, so why this map? This map is showing, and Lincoln talks about this. He says, you can't cut the Mississippi River in two. It's the lifeline of America. You can't get your grain to the world without going all the way through New Orleans. You understand, what river system this city is located on. That's why I'm showing you the color maps in the book are spectacular. And I have several of them. And Lincoln says, you can't bisect the Mississippi River that way. You can't get farm implements up to the Twin Cities without going through the mouth of the Mississippi. You can't get your produce down, okay? This is the source of American greatness. There are only one or two other river systems in the world that are just within one nation. The Danube goes through a dozen nations. So does the Amazon, so does the Nile. We have the whole damn thing, okay, for us. And so we don't need Canada, it turns out. They can breathe easy, okay? They're not part of the Mississippi system, okay? Panama Canal is actually a different story. We could talk about that, because you want to get from New York to California even today, it's sometimes helpful to go through Panama. I promise you, Panama is in the book. Cuba is in the book. You'll learn stuff about geography. You'll learn why borders are actually important. Even if you're a liberal today, you are not understanding the significance of borders and national security to the constitutional project. If you're a conservative today, you need to reacquaint yourself with this all men are created equal stuff, and what it might mean. Okay, I think the one final thing I wanted to tell you. Part of Lincoln's idea of created equal is to give low-born people a chance to rise. Low-born people like Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass is born into dirt. He's born a slave. He doesn't even know his birthday, ever. We know the birth dates of our puppies, our kittens, but he never does. He doesn't even know who his father is. Okay, he's born into nothing, and so was they, but they taught themselves to read, and wow, they could read. And they taught themselves to write, and wow, they could write and speak, and it's astonishing. And Abe says there are others out there like me, and what we need to have are great public universities, land-grant universities that will give low-born people a chance to rise. That's this university. That's why I don't want to take the money of students here. I want to give them books. That's what Abe would want me to do. And the Homestead Act, they're not selling land at the highest bidder. We're trying to create Republican citizens motivated by a deep idea of citizen equality, of birth equality, to give low-born folks a chance. Okay, so I've begun to give you a little bit of a sense of what these two books are all about. I'm sure you've got lots of questions, so should we transition now to that? Thank you very much.
Is this on? Yeah. Yep. No. Okay.
Click it up. You can have this one. Yeah, there we go.
Good. So we have about 10 minutes. We have a microphone over there. I'm going to ask only one question, and anyone who also wants to ask a question, come over to the mic, which may be easiest. Please. Oh, there's one on both sides. Excellent. So just line up quickly. And when you do ask your question, be brief. Make it a question, not a statement. Akhil, about a month ago, you gave a talk in which you said that the Supreme Court would likely uphold birthright citizenship by a 9-0 vote, and that you could possibly imagine 8-1 or 7-2, but you couldn't see 6-3. Given the clarity of the 14th Amendment, and yes, I am breaking my own rule, all persons born or naturalized in the United States, comma, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, comma, are citizens of the United States and of the states wherein they reside. How can you imagine that one or two justices would not vote to uphold birthright citizenship, and how worrisome is it to you that they might, if it is, that they might adopt that stance?
So I have a free weekly podcast, and you can get CLE credit for listening to it. And we go through all the reasons why I think the way I do. It's called America's Constitution. There are 5 years worth of episodes. I think we've missed 1 week in 5 years, 250 archived episodes. So you could listen to that. And some people try to quibble about the word subject to the jurisdiction. I explain why those words are off point. Whatever one can say about one's parents, it's not the issue. It's about me. I'm being born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, under the American flag. It's not about my parents. Whether I'm born in or out of wedlock, it doesn't matter what my parents' relationship was. So why might there be 1 or 2, even possibly 3 votes the other way? Well, I said that partly out of caution because Bush versus Gore did surprise me a bit. The Trump immunity case, I'm pretty good at making predictions, but the Trump immunity case surprised me a bit. all 9 justices disregarded what I would say is the meaning of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which is that Colorado, just for itself, not binding anyone else, was allowed to keep Trump off the ballot if they thought he was playing footsie with insurrectionists. They could do that for virtually any reason because of the Electoral College, but 9 justices sort of missed the plain meaning of the Electoral College in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So partly it was a matter of caution, but here's the reality. I'm an originalist in the Abe Lincoln tradition. I think we have to look what the Constitution actually says. But justices did not grow up learning the Constitution because there weren't books of it, trying to teach them, here's what the Constitution means, start to finish, and here's the story behind it. Here's why we have those rules. Like, they might have said, well, Akhil, they didn't have illegal aliens then. They actually did. You see, because if you read the books, you'll know that slavery, the international slave trade is prohibited in 1808. So you're not supposed to be able to bring slaves from Africa. People still did. And those people are African born and they're American slaves. And Abe Lincoln hangs a slave trader in 1862. People know, and their children, the children of slaves, are supposed to be birthright citizens. But that's a fact that I know and that you will know when you read the books. But you wouldn't know if you didn't grow up actually studying the Constitution. So they hear a lot of cases. They only can devote a certain amount of time to each case unless they know the story of America. Then they can perhaps, it's easier for them to make a mistake, which is why I want them to learn this stuff way before the case ever materializes. I want all the people around President Trump, even if he's not law trained, to actually be able to tell him, and they can say, look, there are lots of things you can do to the parents if they are here illegally. Lots of things you can do. But in America, we don't actually visit the sins of the parents upon the children.
So listen, I think we have 4 people ready to ask questions. So in the interest of time, would the 2 of you ask your questions consecutively? Akhil, you answer those, and then we'll go to you guys.
Thank you for coming to speak. I'm curious, as lawyers, and what your advice would be for how to square this idea of the Constitution as the supreme law of the land with our laws as a tool in an adversarial system to obtain justice. Does that follow?
Okay.
Please.
I'm curious if your book at all goes into the different social forces that helped forge these leaders, whether that's cultural or faith traditions that were deeply present in ways that we often miss in a more secularized modern world.
So one of the deepest issues in a law school is the tension between law and justice. And the Supreme Court has that phrase, equal justice under law. Law isn't always just. And the natural lawyers would say, well, then so much the worse for law, you just do justice. And positivists will say, you have to follow the law. Abe Lincoln is an originalist. An originalist will actually follow the law as they understand it, even if they think it's unjust. They'll try to change it. Abe Lincoln hates slavery with a passion. He uses the word hate, and he's not a hater. He doesn't hate slave owners. He hates slavery. He thinks it's wrong for a bunch of reasons. He says, if slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. I cannot remember a time I did not so think and feel. It's visceral for him. And yet, he says in his first inaugural, I will enforce the Fugitive Slave Clause of the Constitution, even though I think it's wrong. And I won't pretend it's not about fugitive slaves because it doesn't use the word slave. And it doesn't. You could have said, oh, Frederick Douglass says, it doesn't say slave, so it doesn't mean slave. And Abe says, no, it was about slavery. That's what the original intent was. So we're going to have to amend the Constitution. We can't just disregard it. Even though it might be unjust, he will enforce even laws that he considers unjust, and he'll try to amend, and he'll try to tell you, here's why they didn't use the word slave, because they were ashamed of it, and that's relevant. They said all men are created equal. They didn't get rid of slavery, but they gave us a North Star to guide by. They're telling us we have to get rid of it eventually. Okay, so he's not going to pretend as if it's not about fugitive slaves, but he's going to say they omitted the word, this is originalist argument, slave, because they were ashamed of it, and we should take that on board as well. What are some of the driving forces? Oh, my friend, religion is very important. And you'll see that especially with Harriet. She is the utopian religious end of the anti-slavery movement. When she writes to Frederick Douglass, she calls him her brother. That is her brother in Christ. So many, many motivations, some philosophical, some religious, some political. You'll read all about, this book will tell you not just what they agreed to, but what were the forces that caused this. Wars turn out to be very important in this story as well. So the book tries to tell you who were the main people, what motivated them and their followers, and what did they agree to. And if you don't like it, we can amend the thing. If you think birthright citizenship is bad, we could amend the Constitution, but I want you to know why we have it to begin with. And I want you to know there are lots of things you could do to the parents without decitizenizing the child in violation of the plain words, the letter, and spirit of the amendment.
Great. Let's go over here. I can't see if there are two of you or just one now. Just one. Excellent. Okay.
Thank you so much for coming, Professor Amar. I had a question for you. You've shared before about how your brand of originalism is the original intent brand of originalism, and I'm curious how you distinguish between original intent originalism and purposivism.
So I think they're pretty much the same thing. And there are a lot of, we can have all these fine-grained debates, original understanding, original public meaning, original methods originalism, original purpose originalism. People tend to say the things they mean and mean the things they say. There's not a big difference between all of that. And we can get really hung up on this, and Scalia did. And Scalia did that, frankly, because he didn't know any history. And he tried to turn, actually, what is ultimately an historical inquiry into some fun little language games for him. And he's not my hero. So I'm going to be honest about this. So in my view, Scalia didn't read, and he's dead. So he's, okay. And he didn't read books, much less write them. And I teach a book that he actually wrote. I wrote the preface to the book. It's a Scalia book. It's called A Matter of Interpretation. And I don't think it's very good. And I say that in the preface. Okay? I also give him his due. And I say, here's what's impressive, and here's what's not. So there are all these little fine, here's the big thing. All originalism can do is get the easy cases right. And after that, you're going to need all sorts of doctrinal tests, Yogi Berra, he supposedly said, gee, if we could only move first base 1 foot, we get rid of all the close plays. Now, there's always going to be a close play, of course. So all originalism can do is get big questions right. And they're going to be right, whether we call them original meaning, original intent, purpose. So here's what I mean. Because courts over the years have gotten big questions, easy ones, wrong. Segregation. For 50 years, the court upheld segregation, Plessy. The Constitution says equal. What kind of equality? It's clearly about racial equality, not just racial equality. I said birth equality. Where is born in the 14th Amendment, riffing on created equal. And if they meant just race, they could have said it. They said in the 15th Amendment, race, color, previous condition, or servitude. Birth equality, whether you're born black or white, male or female, I would say Jew or Gentile, gay or straight, in wedlock or out of wedlock. Birth equality. People are being exalted because they're white and demeaned because they're black. That's Plessy. And 7 justices, 8 justices get that wrong. That was an easy case, okay? Whether you call it meaning, purpose, intent, whatever. When you're getting easy cases wrong, for the 14th Amendment was about applying fundamental rights against states and localities, what lawyers call incorporation. Well, judges didn't do that for the longest time, okay? Roe, I'm pro-choice, but it doesn't root, the case doesn't root the thing in the Constitution, and eventually, you see, it gets overturned because it doesn't. So in the long run, here's my descriptive claim. In the long run, the Constitution often wins out because it really does say things. And eventually, people say, oh, yeah, there really is a history. They meant to say what they said. And so I think Churchill or some other Brit said, the Americans can be counted on to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. Okay? And we've come back to the Constitution typically again and again after we've tried all sorts of other stuff. These fine-grained, intramural debates about exactly what kind of originalism, and that's what you learn at FedSoc conventions and all the rest. They're interesting, but Scalia got big things wrong, like birth equality. If you believe, and this is the key move, that people are born, many of us, not all of us, with sexual orientations, sexual tendencies, proclivities. I don't think I chose mine. I think I was born. So if you're with Gaga and thinking that people are born this way, well, then that means if people who are born straight can marry, people who are born gay should be allowed to marry. He gets that wrong, okay? And it's just equal means equal. And that was Brown. And that's Obergefell. And I'll tell you one final thing. The language, the first court that said there's a right of same-sex marriage was the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court in a case called Goodrich, 2005. And it based it on the language of the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780 that says all men are born free and equal. Riffing on all men are created equal. That was 1780, John Adams, who was there on July 4th, 1776. A whole bunch, this is the final point, because I know we run.
This is your last final point.
You've heard of 1619, slavery exists in the world. Here's the big, way before 1619. What Americans do, we're the first people in the world to do, is abolish slavery, end slavery. That's an American idea. And it begins in 1775 and 1776. Immediately after all men are created equal, Pennsylvania will say in the state constitution, all men are born equally free and independent, and it'll get rid of slavery. And Massachusetts will say all men are born equal, and it's going to get rid of slavery. And a whole bunch of northern states will do that, and Abe Lincoln will stand on their shoulders. That's the introduction to this book. And it's still reverberating today because, at least in my lifetime, I don't know if you were born after 2005, but those same words were used in Massachusetts to affirm same-sex marriage. These words, they're still being debated. They still reverberate, but you need to know what the words are and where they came from and what the big idea is underlying them.
Listen, Before I thank Akhil, just a couple of practical points. First, Akhil will be signing books in the Auerbach Commons, which is one floor up from here on the way to the exit. Second, and I don't want you to stampede, but the first 12 students who get up there will get one of these books for free. My friend Val Horton over here is going to carry them up. Do not harm her. Wait patiently. Final small thing, if you'd let me and Akhil scoot up the side so he'll be up there waiting for you when you come to buy his book, we'd be grateful. As someone like you who is a beneficiary of birthright citizenship, let me just thank you on behalf of all of us for giving this talk and writing these books and opening our minds. Thank you.